Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Well, this has been a busy year so far for Congress with a lot more to come, and today we're honored to have Congressman Billy Long joining us today. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me in.
And you're back in the district for a visit, and you've had a chance to visit some of our local businesses in the last couple of days.
Yes, we most certainly have, and it's always, we do a manufacturing tour every year, and it's great to get around and see the employees, and they're so proud of their jobs. We've got a great work ethic here in the 7th District, so it's really good to get around and see folks. And we saw several different manufacturing facilities today, going to see more, or yesterday, and going to see more today. So, yeah.
You see firsthand how people are doing in this district on the job.
Right, and we've noticed a big difference over the last year in the economy. Everyone knows the stock market's gone up exponentially since the president was elected, and with our Tax Cut and Jobs Act that we passed and got signed into law, it's made a big difference for these companies. One company, Wintech, here in Monette, Missouri, has got new equipment, new paint equipment to put on the powdered paint in the big drying tunnels and things, where they used to just push things in manually on a cart and have to let it bake and then push it back out and, you know, apply the paint. And this way it goes around on a chain, and just kind of makes it a whole lot easier for their employees to handle, and plus the production, they can get a lot more out. But a lot of these places are very busy. A lot of them are working 4 10-hour shifts, and then they call them in on Friday also for an 8-hour shift. So it's really good to see the economy up and churning, you know, and these are, a lot of these are not easy jobs. These folks are, you know, working hard, but still they love to come up and say, hey, Congressman, I want to meet you, and I've been here 19 years. I've been here 25 years. They're all so proud of their jobs. And Heritage Oaks over in Sarcoxy we went to yesterday, and they only been operating as Heritage Oaks for 4 years, but they already have 110 employees. So can you imagine 110 employees in the city the size of Sarcoxy? It really makes a big difference. And so, and they're shipping products all over the world. And Lowe's, they stock a lot of trim work to Lowe's. They, of course, their hardwood floorings, they're stock and trade, and most all that wood's grown right here in Missouri too. So it really does a lot for Missouri jobs. And then I know that Boeing is doing a lot of things for the military now after the budget passed, and they put so much more money back into the military that we drastically needed. Boeing up in St. Louis is employing a lot of folks. So a lot of good things happening out there in the employment front.
So people having jobs is a very good positive impact.
Yeah.
Well, when you look back, we're recording this early May, the first 5 months of the year, when you look at what's happened in Congress and someone says, what are some of the accomplishments you would like to point to?
Well, we've made a lot of headway on the abortion issue. We've passed a lot of bills in that regard, and unfortunately a lot of the bills that we've passed in other areas are sitting over in the Senate side, so it's time for the senators to take up some of our bills and pass them. We just had a big change at the State Department. Mike Pompeo was just sworn in as the new Secretary of State, and I think you're going to see a big difference there. North Korea, one of the big things that's happened this year, and I'd said all along that if you look at what H.W. did, Herbert Walker Bush did with North Korea, if you look what Bill Clinton did his 8 years after him, what George W. Bush did in his 8 years with North Korea, what President Obama did in his 8 years in North Korea, over that 24-year period or whatever it was, North Korea has nuclear weapons and they have ballistic missiles. Now, whether they have figured out the technology to marry the two and miniaturize and be able to deliver a nuclear missile to the United States, we don't know if they can do that yet, but all the experts say that it's sure there, that they're going to have it soon if they don't now. And everyone was so upset with this president because he was, talk tough, and he tweeted a little rocket man and said he was going to blow him away, and everybody said, oh, he's going to start a war, he's going to start a war. Well, if you remember, that's a lot like what they said about President Reagan, that he was unhinged. He said all options are on the table, he's going to start World War III. Well, instead of starting World War III, the Berlin Wall came down. And so now that Kim Jong-un has agreed to meet with he's already met with our new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and they kind of snuck Pompeo over there over the Easter break. We weren't even apprised of it in Congress. And so I think those things are good. The North and South are talking now. They're doing things they've never done before. Kim Jong-un says he will denuclearize. Now, can you trust him or not? but we're going to find out. And all of Trump's naysayers say, oh, nothing will come of it, nothing will come of it. But I say let them try, because Trump's a pretty good negotiator, and we've gotten him a lot further than we ever have before. So that's one of the really big things that's happened in the first few months of this year is the situation with North Korea, and kind of, turning down the heat on that, because it was looking pretty dangerous there for a while.
So really the international relations now are really taking the forefront of a lot of things you're looking at.
Right,
like
and one thing that they, have done is, everybody talks about nuclear war. Well, a conventional war is not an option on the Korean Peninsula, in my opinion. There's 14,000 tubes pointed at, where they could fire rockets today into North Korea at a moment, into South Korea at a moment's notice, and hit Seoul, where there's 20 million people. You could kill millions of people with their artillery tubes that they have right now. So conventional war is not an option. A nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula could be the end of mankind as we know it, literally. So though we don't have a good war option there, so we need to talk, we need to negotiate, and it looks like things are going in the right direction. So like I say, Trump's naysayers, and there's a lot of Trump naysayers out there, but they are, in fact, someone was telling me at breakfast this morning, said, oh, nothing's going to come from that. Well, let's see. He's done a lot better than anybody else has at this point.
So some optimism there, possibilities, and
You
things
bet.
that are happening along those lines. You mentioned the international relations, and the military kind of plays into that. Support for the military, as far as in the budget, you have some support more this time.
Right. The military had gone untended to for a number of years, and Mad Dog Mattis got what he wanted, and so they're going to be able to beef back up the military. What Ronald Reagan, that's another thing he did, was had a strong military. And my philosophy is I want the best, the biggest military in the world, and never have to use it. Just the thought that you can come across the United States is not a thought anybody's going to really think too long and hard on. They're going to say, wait a minute, if we take on the United States, that's the end of our country. So having a good, strong military is very important, and supporting our men and women that are out there every day putting their life on the line. We've had a lot of training accidents, more training accidents than ever. We've lost a lot of men and women in those accidents, and so that's showing you that the equipment's not what it is, the training's not what it was supposed to be. And so that's one thing that the folks on the Armed Services Committee, which Vicki Hartzler, who's just north of us here, she district, I hate to say her number, I think it's 4 maybe. I never always get the different district. I know mine's number 7,
Right.
but the other ones I'm not sure, but I think she's District 4. But she's on Armed Services. She has Whiteman Air Force Base in her district. She also has Fort Leonard Wood, so she always stays attuned to what needs to be done with that.
The military. Well, related to the military, veterans, after you serve, I know for the district, people are aware that Joplin's getting a new veterans center. I mean, talk a little bit about how that has come about.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people think that I had something to do with that, but I have to say that all started before I went to Congress. They put forth a commission, and they came back and they said we need to build a new clinic in Springfield, Joplin, and Bella Vista, Arkansas. Right. And for a while, the Springfield one was the only one people were talking about. I said, wait a minute, we're doing one in Joplin too. And so it's going to serve 60% of the veterans in the 7th District will be served in Springfield. 40% will be served in the Joplin facility. And they're going to have mental health abilities and everything else that they've been lacking for a while. So yeah, it's really, really good to see those new VA clinics opening up, because our veterans, that's one thing we can all agree on in Congress, we have to take care of our veterans. And I, in my office in Springfield, have a lady, and that's her job 24/7 is to take care of the veterans, and she does a fabulous job. Lisa Saylor is her name, and she's done such a good job that she's created such a reputation that one veteran will tell the other, oh, call Lisa, call Lisa. In fact, last night my wife and I were at Rosie Joe's down in Ozark, a little ma and pa restaurant there, and the guy at the next table, people, you can see them looking at you. They're like, well, I think, that's Billy Long over there, or whatever, and so, he did that bit for a while, and then finally he turned a chair around. He said, look, I want to tell you, I want to thank you for what Lisa did in your office for me. He said, I moved here a few years ago to Missouri and had problems getting my benefits and things, and said your office really went to bat for me. And the same thing here in Joplin with Jake and Kim in our Joplin office. Jake does a lot of passport issues for people, and you'd be surprised how many people. I had someone the other day contact me that was in Spain, and his passport expired on the day that he landed in Spain. And so he was stuck in Spain until we could, Jake could help him and get his passport straightened out. But if, the third month and the 9th day is different than the 9th month and the 3rd day, and that's how, sometimes the passports...
the dates slip
yeah,
there.
Yeah, they get them backwards, and they say, well, I've got another 6 or 7 months before my passport expires. So, and I would always encourage people also to get a passport and have a passport. You never know when you're going to need it. And we had one lady that worked for a superintendent of schools down in Nixon, Missouri. She was his assistant, has been for years. Well, her daughter went off to college and went to China and was on some type of an event in China. I don't know if she's supposed to be there a week or 2 weeks or how long her stay was, but they contacted her and they said, your daughter is extremely ill. You need to get to China as soon as possible. Well, guess what?
She didn't have the passport.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Judy. She didn't have a passport. So she came to us and we expedited the process. Jake did, like I said, in Joplin here, and expedited the process for her, and we got her a passport and got her in the air. And I looked on my schedule one day in Washington, because you always have people from the district coming to town, and I looked at my schedule and it said that, this lady's coming by to thank you. I'm like, thank me for what?
Right.
And so, she had done, they told me the story about China and the daughter and everything, and she came, I just want to get my picture taken. We were, so thankful that your office was so helpful to us. And that's something I'd like to express here today, is that we have offices in Washington, D.C., Springfield, Missouri, and Joplin, Missouri. And there are so many things Congress can help with that people don't always think. Well, if they have a problem with the SBA, or if they have a problem with the IRS, or if they have a problem with, we even had a post office problem where someone had a rental house and one of their tenants had moved their post box from the porch where it had been all these years out to the street. But for some reason, I don't know if I think maybe they had bad dogs and they didn't want people coming up on their porch or something. Well, it's a renter. The guy didn't own the house. So when that renter moved out or got evicted, whatever, then the owner put the mailbox back up on the porch where his mother had it. It was her home, for years and years and years. And the post office pitched a fit, and they said, oh, no, you can't do that. Now that it's on the street, it's going to stay there.
The rules say it's going to stay there.
And so we had to go to bat for them and get that straightened out with the post office. And so Corps of Engineers, we deal a lot with the Corps of Engineers, trying to work out issues and problems between the public and the Corps of Engineers. So a lot of, we want to encourage people to call our Joplin office, our Springfield office, or our Washington, D.C. office, and we can always get you to the right person. If our veterans person's in Springfield, if they call Kim here in Joplin, she'll say, well, I need to put you in contact with Elise up in Springfield. And people, like I say, the passport issue is always a big issue, and I always say, Jake's my passport man,
Right.
Kind of like call Jake from State Farm, call Jake at Billy's office.
So constituent services being a big part of what you're dealing
exactly.
with and so forth. Well, as you're visiting and seeing constituents, people are following up. You mentioned the budget and the tax cuts and so forth. What are the kind of concerns are you hearing? We're hearing, a lot of stories coming out of Washington, but what are people telling you when they do visit?
You'd be surprised. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised because you live in the 7th District, but people are very upset about this Russia collusion thing, how long it has drug on, and the people come up to me all the time and they say, when are they going to get off Trump's back? When are they going to let him do something? What's this? They've investigated Russia for over a year now. They found nothing. When's that going to stop, Billy? Now you go to another district in a liberal area and they're going to say, oh, they're going to impeach Trump tomorrow. So it depends on the district. But in my district, that's exactly what I'm hearing, is that the people want that collusion thing to come to an end. I think that Mueller ought to be able to do his job, finish it up. I'm not one for firing him. I want to let it run its course and see where it leads, and hopefully everything will, come out in the wash and be good. So far it has been for the president. And another thing that, they have what they call Trump derangement syndrome. People are upset with Trump. If you start out upset with Trump, you still are. And his nominations that he's made for all the different positions that he needs to fill to run the United States government, he's got less than 50% of those filled now after a year and 4 months or 5 months. This is the 5th month, I guess, or soon will be. He got sworn in January 20, so I guess that's a year and 4 months. And he's got less than 50%. At the same time, I think Barack Obama had 79% of his nominees in, and the president tweeted out the other day, he said, at this pace, it'll only take me 9 years to fill all my positions in a 4-year term.
So that's where you have to have that cooperation between
Right.
Congress and the Washington and the president and so forth. We just recently heard that Missouri's going to send some National Guard troops to the border security issue. Are you hearing people talking about that?
Yes, yeah, people are very concerned about our borders and how lax our security is on the border. I made a tour of the border some time ago, went down to the San Diego sector, the Tucson sector, the McAllen sector, and the border is so different at so many different points along there. The issues that they face in San Diego are different than what the farmers face in Tucson and what they face at McAllen, where you can sometimes walk across the Rio Grande.
It's just a little creek, basically.
We're using a lot of drone technology down there. We're flying drones. We have drones right there in Texas and in Arizona. Watching the border, and then they can show you boats coming over at night, with night vision off their drones, and see maybe an 8-man raft with 22 people on it paddling across, and they'll get over. Then you'll see the Border Patrol agents coming up through the bushes, and then they see them, and they all scurry back to the boat and start paddling back the other way. So it's a cat and mouse game, but it's something, and the drug situation is just horrific. And we're doing a lot on opioids, and a lot of those drugs are coming up from Mexico, and that's a huge, huge problem. And so we had 7 families in week before last that had lost children, and some of them, their kids were in college, and they found out that they'd been to the hospital. Well, they first heard that their son tripped and fell and hit his head, had to go to the hospital. They knew about that. When he ended up being deceased, they told the family, they said, well, he's been in the hospital 7 times. But due to the HIPAA laws, they couldn't tell his parents that he had been to the hospital. So they didn't know that he had this drug problem. They didn't know that it was going to kill him. And so this opioid thing is a very serious, serious thing. In West Virginia, 52 out of 1,000 people die from opioid abuse. And they've got a new not new technology, but a new theory there that they're going back looking at everyone that deceased in the last year, 887 people from opioid abuse, and studying those individual people to see later on if they can, right next door in Ohio, it's 32 per 1,000 people, so it's a huge nationwide problem. I think there's 115 people a day dying from opioids, and they get on opioids, well then they buy heroin because heroin's cheaper than the opioids.
So from Congress's point of view, you're looking at how we're controlling, I guess, the manufacture or the distribution of that, or people have the ability?
There are so many opioid-related bills right now. That's one thing that we're doing in Congress is trying to jury all that and sort it out and talk to the experts. Next week we're going to have drug manufacturers in front of my committee, Energy and Commerce, interviewing them, the opioid manufacturers themselves. So that's going to be a very widely watched committee hearing that we have. And so people are so many different angles to it, and everyone wants to help, but you want to talk to the experts and find out what type of legislation will best address the situation, because it is totally, totally out of control. On the other side, you have people that have pain issues that have to have something to cease the pain, but we don't need something that's addictive like the opioids are. And when they first came out, they promised them, they told us they were not addictive, which was, a huge lie.
Yeah. Right. Well, you mentioned committee work, Energy and Commerce. I know a few weeks ago there was a lot of attention in Washington when Facebook was in the spotlight, looking at the situations there. Your committees, finding out what's happening with our social media, our privacy, and those types of things.
Right, and I was really surprised at the lack of interest from my constituents. I represent 751,000 people. I was surprised at the lack of phone calls, the lack of emails. I think we had 10 or less that were worried about the privacy concerns. We're very worried about the privacy concerns, but the public didn't seem to be. Everyone wants to be on Facebook. Everybody wants to reach out to their friends. Everybody wants to know what kind of a barbecue sauce their friend put on their steak last night or whatever, or on their barbecue ribs. And it's so, everyone is so into Facebook that they're like, oh yeah, well I know they send me ads and they know what I'm looking at and this, that, and the other, and it doesn't bother me. So it's kind of surprising to me. and Diamond and Silk, who are two biological sisters from North Carolina that have kind of become famous on YouTube, and I guess they're on Fox News some now too, with hits on there. But they're I wouldn't say a comedy team, but it's comical, some of the things they say, but they're big supporters of the president. And so Facebook had, limited their numbers of followers, had dropped and dropped and dropped, and they thought Facebook was blocking them. Facebook said, well, and I asked Mark Zuckerberg, I said, what's dangerous about two sisters in North Carolina? Because they told him it was dangerous. I said, what's dangerous about supporting the president? And he said, well, nothing, Congressman. So there's those concerns. I saw just yesterday, Facebook announced that they are going to be checking content and blocking content. And I guess now on Facebook that they have something, if you put a video up of kittens, playing, that they'll say, is this hate speech? If you put a video up of a cake you baked for your daughter's wedding, they can say, is this hate speech? I guess on everything now they want to know if it's hate speech, which is kind of very unusual, I would say.
So people are kind of giving up their rights of privacy by going through this. And
yeah, right. Yeah, but they're like, it's like, over the top to have you rate kittens, whether kittens playing or hate speech.
Tying all that together. So
I guess you'd have to speak kittenese.
Well, committee work is a busy part of your life when you're in Washington, going to the different hearings, and you have a lot of presentations. For people who aren't there, they think, well, you're in the big session talking all the time, but you have a lot of behind-the-scenes work with committee work, studying issues, and things like that.
Yeah, a lot of people see the congressman at the airport when you fly out once a week on 2 planes and come back once a week on 2 planes. You run into a lot of people in the airport, and so they see you, rushing off to Washington, coming home from Washington, and they see you voting on the floor and speaking on the floor, and they think that that's the biggest part of the job. But you're exactly right. The real work is done in committees. FDA had a law a few years ago where when you go in to get a prescription filled, your pharmacist would have to kill a bunch of trees and hand you a stack of papers telling you how to take your medication. Maybe you've taken the same medication for 15 years and you sure know how to take it, but they want to explain it to you every time. And so the pharmacists had hired lawyers and spent millions of dollars trying to get FDA. They said, why can't we get people to opt in electronically? And I had one of the guys in from the FDA one day, and I said, let me, if I go into the pharmacy and I want to get my prescription filled and something I've taken for 15 years, and I really don't want them to kill a bunch of trees, I don't want them to hand me a stack of papers that I have to throw in the trash on the way out the door, what would be wrong, sir, if we opted in, if they would allow me to opt in electronically? I say, just email me those instructions. Right. And he turned around to his staff behind him, his lawyers, and whisper, and he turned around and said, Congressman, I don't know, but we'll get you an answer. And it was either that afternoon or the next morning that they changed the law, or the rule. I guess it was a rule more than a law. And it had been fought for years. They spent millions of dollars on attorneys, and it took just one simple question from a congressman to, sometimes common sense isn't common, and if you can bring up some common sense solutions, it works pretty good sometimes.
Good. Well, I know you mentioned common sense. Sometimes Washington is under that spotlight, and people back home are wondering, how can they be accomplishing things in Washington? Do you face that frustration sometime with dealing with people in Washington?
Sure. There's people that, and I could show you a stack of bills that we've sent over, like I say, to the Senate this year. Actually, in Congress, we've been more productive than forever, for a very long time, and the number of bills we've had signed, the bills we've sent over, passed out of the House, sent to the Senate, and they languish in the Senate.
So that's roadblock when it gets to the other side.
Frustrating. They say, from a Republican standpoint, that the Democrats are the opposition and the Senate is the enemy.
So there's still that divisiveness or challenges in Washington in many cases. Even though you still have Republican control of House and Senate, you still have those challenges to get things done.
You do have Republican control of the House and Senate. You do not have a working majority in the Senate, and there is where the rub comes in. We have 51, I think, with Thad Cochran's retirement. I believe there's 51 Republican senators now, and John McCain is ill. He's not able to come in at all, so you're really down to 50, 40, 48, I think it is, on the other side. And you have to have 60 to even bring any bill to the floor for cloture. And so that's kind of like earlier when I was talking about the nominees and things that are being held up. There's a 30-hour rule for cloture, and for no reason at all on these bipartisan nominees that are going to pass 99 to nothing or whatever, they still are invoking a 30-hour rule. And James Lankford, right next door over here in Oklahoma, Senator Lankford, he was in my freshman class as a congressman. So was Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State. We were all in the same freshman class. But James has a bill up now that would limit that 30-hour debate to 8 hours for these nominees. So we're trying to always work on ways to get some of these nominees through. And like I say, in Mitch McConnell, I saw him at an event on Friday night, or Saturday night, I mean, and it just, if he would change, it's a rule, it's not a law. If they change that 60-vote rule, we could really get a lot of things done for this
so
country.
Kind of internal operations that are slowing down things.
Right. We don't have a 60-vote rule in the House, but they do in the Senate for cloture, just to bring a bill to the floor. So if you can't get 10 Democrats on your side to do it, then nothing's going to happen.
So a slow down on the other side. Well, a lot of things still to come this year. We're recording in May. What do you see as some of the goals you have as you head into summer?
Appropriations. We're trying to get our appropriation bills passed out of the House. We've had discussions about whether to do continuing resolutions, which I hate, or do a big omnibus bill, which I always vote against. And we want to do our work, and there's discussions on our side in the House whether to do 3 or 4 of the appropriation bills or whether to do all 12, and a lot of us want to do all 12 and do it like it's supposed to be done, and then everybody says, well, the Senate won't take them up. The Senate, they're going to jam us. Senate's going to jam us in the end, and we might as well just get ready for that and have to do a big omnibus, before September, before the end of the fiscal year. And it doesn't matter if we know they're going to jam us. I think we should do our work and do appropriations like they should be done, and do them through committee, and pass them out of the committee, and then vote on them on the floor, and do it the way it should be done. So appropriations, interest rates have ticked up, as everyone knows. That is a huge impact on our national debt. The interest we're paying on the debt, with every time the interest ticks up a little bit,
you're paying a little bit more out of your
increase. Yeah.
And tying all of that together. So it's going to be a busy summer for you in Washington.
Yes. Yeah.
And then briefly, you mentioned earlier constituents' summer's vacation season. If somebody from the district is going to travel to Washington, they can contact your office?
Yes. And if they want to get in the White House, we can most generally always get them in the White House. Gentleman mentioned earlier here this morning, he and his daughter were out to see me, and I met him at the White House. Well, I was glad to do it. I do it all the time, but what that means is that we didn't have as much notice on him to get him in. If you'll give us enough notice, I don't need to meet you. We can get you the tickets, and you can go in. Yeah, but like I said, I don't mind. I do it all the time. I meet constituents over there all the time, and let them in for White House tours. And we want them to enjoy what our national treasures, the Library of Congress, all the different memorials, the Museum of the Bible. I just went through it for the first time the other day, and they said it would take 9 8-hour days to see it all, or it'd take 40 days and 40 nights. So
so there's plenty to see when people visit Washington, to come by and see you and so forth. So, well, I'd like to thank you very much for taking time while you're in the district to visit with us. I appreciate it.
I always enjoy coming over. When I see this on my calendar, I always think I'm going to get to see Judy, and that's always a pleasure. And you do such a good job with this program. It's, always, don't ever invite me if you don't want me, because I'll always show up.
Well, I appreciate you coming, and I'm sure the viewers enjoy the opportunity to hear from you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on the station. We'll see you then.